Hola, vamos a continuar este tópico de conversación con práctica de hablar de literatura, los libros, los cuentos y las otras obras. So with this section, what I'd like to do is focus on some questions and some things you can say and some things to think about if you're going to talk about literature in Spanish. Let's say you read a story, a short story, or maybe a book, or even a text, an ensayo, an essay, and you want to discuss that topic in Spanish. These are some things you might hear and some ways you might want to respond to those questions, some ways to get you started. Dime. This is a really important one. Significa tell me. You might hear this as dime del cuento, dime del libro, dime de la obra, dime del ensayo, dime del texto. All of these things are asking you to tell me about something. Tell me about the story, dime el cuento. Tell me about the book, el libro. Tell me about the ensayo, the essay. Tell me about the text, dime del texto. All of these things I'm asking you to describe, to tell me about those things. Some respuestas you can use. The really good, just generic one here, este, it is about. If I say dime del cuento, you can say este un hombre muy guapo. You just start your story off, starting with este, it is about. Again, if you want to describe in detail, you would go into more detail after that point. You would give me a basic idea and then give me some more detail about your story, a good summary of that story. Some other things you could say. Pues is just a really good starter. It means like well, and you can just start your sentences off with that. Pues este. Other things you could use. Sigue, discute, habla de, describe. Sigue, it follows. Sigue un hombre que luchaba para la paz. It follows the story of a man who fought for peace. Discute. Discute la idea del español como idioma segundo. It discusses. Discute. Habla de. It talks about. Habla de un perro y su mejor amigo, el gato. Describe. It describes. Describe la relación entre la gente de los Estados Unidos y la gente de España. ¿Cuál es el tema is something very important when you're talking about literature in any form. Significa what is the theme? What is the moral of the story? What is the main idea of this ensayo, libro, texto? Algunas respuestas. El tema es, the theme is whatever the theme you believe that theme or that moral or the main idea is. Some things you could add to that are, en mi opinión, in my opinion, en mi opinión, el tema es del amor y las relaciones. Creo que, I believe that, creo que el tema es, again, a mí, to me, for me. A mí el tema es. So these are things you could just kind of add on to that basic understanding. So again, you'd want to really make sure you understand the tema of whatever you just read so that you can describe and discuss cuál es el tema. ¿Qué significa? Now we use this a lot for different things when we're talking in Spanish. ¿Qué significa la pelota? You just stick whatever in there. What does this mean? So significa, what does blank mean? Or what is the significance of? In the case of literature, we're probably asking what is the significance of rather than what does it mean. If we say, ¿qué significa la pelota? ¿Qué significa el disco? I'm probably asking what does that mean in English. In this case, with literature or things that you have read, I'm probably asking what is the significance of that topic or that thing. Especially if I'm listening to you talk to me, I might pick up on something and I want to ask you, what do you think that the significance of that is for this story? Some respuestas you can think of here. Significa. You start with significa. And then describe that significance, what it means. And again, we can reuse those opinion words we just talked about. En mi opinión significa blah, blah, blah. Creo que, a mí, para mí. All of those things are going to be useful when we're talking about the significance of a certain concept in your story. ¿Cómo te afecta is another deeper, more opinion item, something you'll have to think outside the box with whatever you read. ¿Cómo te afecta significa how does it affect you? Or if it's in the past, ¿cómo te afectó? Or ¿cómo te afectaba? How did it affect you? How was it affecting you when you read the story? And here respuestas can be para mí, for me, in my opinion, me afecta en que it affects me in this way. You would continue it on with how it affects you. Me afectaba en que it affected me in that. Me afectó when I read it, it affected me in this way. So you would have to understand that question of whatever's being asked to you of how did that affect you? But that baseline question, ¿cómo te afecta? And that baseline response, me afecta. You're responding, you take the te out. Anything that's in second person, you want to change the first person in your response. Anything in third can usually stay in third. ¿Qué es la relación entre, or describe la relación entre? What is the relationship between, or describe the relationship between? And here you might hear some characters, or some themes in the story, or possibly some just general aspects of whatever it is that you read. So some respuestas you can use here. La relación es, or las relaciones son. You want to make those all plural if you're going to go the plural route. And again, we use these opinion questions. En mi opinión, la relación es de. Creo que la relación es. Para mí, la relación es. A mí, la relación es. All of these things can be used to describe those relationships between, like I said, the characters, the themes, the topics, the different concepts used throughout your story. Finally, here I have listed for you some palabras y frases importantes para hablar de un cuento, de un libro de ensayo o de un texto. Los personajes significa characters. Caracteres is not characters. In a story, in a book, and things that you read, los personajes, those are the characters in your story. El conflicto, exactly how it sounds, the conflict. That's something you could use, you could slide in there. El conflicto entre de el personaje uno y el personaje dos. El escritor o el autor, again, you can change that to be feminine too. La escritora, la autora, is the author. You might want to slip something in about an author if you're reading a certain text or a certain essay as well. El efecto, the effect, not the affect. Remember, an affect affects an effect. The effect is a noun, the affect, como afectar, it's a verb. Effect is your noun here, el efecto. This is something too that can be really useful when you're talking about literature. And the key, aside from circumlocution, remember circumlocution, that's its whole own thing that is describing something that you can't think of the word for. But es decir que is also just key and be able to talk really well. Es decir que is just something you can use to kind of fill almost anything. That is to say, es decir que es un tópico muy importante para la gente de estos años, hoy en día. Es decir que you can slip it into different things to try and redirect as well. If you have said something, you're not sure it makes sense or it's not very clear, you can slip that back in. Just say es decir que and say it again in a different way that hopefully makes it more clear. And it's more of a less stuttery way of re-emphasizing or repeating your words in a way that sounds more fluid and very more fluent in general, and it feels more fluent when you're talking. There you have some general notes on talking about literature, different texts or ensayos if you're wanting to discuss those things in Spanish to continue our conversation or practice with conversation. I hope it was helpful for you, and definitely try and use these things in conversation as well as you're writing when you're writing a paper. Adios.